Hi guys, and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. We help Muslims and non-Muslims alike to understand and handle Islam in the 21st century. We consider ourselves to be decent human beings, so we condemn categorically any abuse, oppression, misogyny, slavery, violence, anything like that. We do embrace, however, free speech and also criticism, even if it is directed at us, if it is factual and constructive criticism. We focus on Islam exclusively. So if you're curious about anything Islam, you've come to the right place. Now, we don't attack, which is aggressive, destructive, and antagonistic, neither Islam nor Muslims. We ask questions and show facts. We refute false claims and present the reality of Islam, which is political Islam. We inspect, investigate, research, analyze, and then report and critique on Islam, the ideology, not the people. Now, the live stream goes to YouTube and Facebook, and there are three ways that you can participate in this. Either you join us in the live written chat, you can join the panel during the live show, or later on watch and comment the archive. And anyone can join to comment, critique, contribute, or question. This is not a Dawa channel with censorship. Don't go to Patreon, don't go to PayPal. Everything here is free. The way we work is usually we have some news, some Krazy Komments, a segment where we go and read the Quran, and then a discussion on the theme of the month, followed by integrating the live chat, ending with a Hadith of the week. If this is not enough Islam for you, there's still the Discord channel where you can discuss with us without anything being recorded. See you later and enjoy the Gin and Tonic Show. Hello and welcome everybody to the Gin and Tonic Show. It is Friday, it is 8 p.m. UK time, it is the 2nd of February, so there's no April Fool's joke or anything. Welcome to the panelists. Let me start with our Mustafa.
Hello.
How are you, Mr.
Hello, I'm all right. It's still cold up here in the north, and it's 3 p.m. here to be exact. So there's the time zone difference.
Oh my goodness, and here's 25 degrees, so there's a little bit of a difference. And Mr. Speakers, what speakest thou?
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Stops and Mustafa. Good evening to the audience.
Good evening.
Yeah, as Stops and I've said, tough couple of days. We're going to be putting my dog down tomorrow, who's had ongoing ailments. And I was saying to Stops today that I dug the grave out in the garden, which is a bit of a sobering experience. Not that I drink anyway, but a bit more of a sobering experience. So a bit of spending a bit of time with the dog and reflecting just a little bit on a little bit of life, but time spent doing things and with certain people or animals in this case. So so that's something tomorrow morning. And I think we're the only species, as it turns out, or as I understand it, that knows that we're going to die. No other species, as far as we can tell, knows that it's mortal and it's going to eventually die. So sobering experience. So but otherwise I'm here and otherwise in good health.
Oh no, sorry to hear about your dog. May he rest in peace.
Yeah, it's always a sobering thing if you lose somebody close to you. It doesn't matter whether it's a pet or whatever. Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay, on that note, hello panel, hello people who are watching, hello all viewers, spectators who are expecting a train wreck. No. We're gonna be talking about Muhammad in the month of April, and since there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, 5 Fridays in this month, I thought it's the only time. When was it? In January that we had this, but here we are again, another 5 Fridays in a single month. Brilliant. So we're going to really go in great depth into Muhammad. Sorry, Mustafa?
Yeah, and today is Good Friday itself.
Oh, true. I forgot about that. Is it a Good Friday? Yeah, it was brilliant weather. Do you know the history a bit? What actually happens on Good Friday? Isn't that Good Friday the Friday that Jesus apparently died or something, was crucified or something?
Yeah, he was crucified that specific day. And
so what's good about Good Friday then?
I don't know. I don't know what's good about this day at all.
Presumably the idea that that he was crucified, that was a good thing, because ultimately that led to the washing away of all sins, even though you still got to ask forgiveness and be judged afterwards anyway. So I'm not too sure how much of a help it did to begin with, but I suppose that's the idea, that somebody came and sacrificed themselves, as if that sort of vicarious sacrifice is a good thing. I didn't ask for it, and I wouldn't have wanted it to happen were I there at the time. I think Hitchens has said that more eloquently than I have. So I don't see that as being good, personally.
Absolutely. It's, it's kind of a paradox or an irony.
Well, it's a scapegoat, so it's hypocritical in any case. Anyway, but then, hang on, I remember he's supposed to be dead 3 days, and it doesn't work, because it's only Friday, then it's Saturday he's dead, Sunday he's dead, and then Monday he gets up again, so it's only 2 days. And Christians have a hell of a time explaining this, and they said, well, you have to count the half of the Friday and half of the Monday, and then it makes sense again. It's apologetics. So, anyway, whatever the case may be, it's a long holiday, and it's useless, I think. I don't need to have a Good Friday or Easter Monday or something. And I hear the Pope did something today. Well, isn't it wonderful? Anyway, we are talking about Islam. And if I start with the news, then this is actually it's also sobering. No, actually, sorry, we need to start with the inspiration. I like this inspiration thing, actually. Maybe I'm a masochist or something. Anyway, it says, speak, and this is a quote from the Quran, okay? And please note that even in the Quran, they can't find enough good things to say, so they even have to include words in brackets which are not really there, which have been added to make them good. So this is the inspirational thing. And speak to people good words. So in other words, why can't it just say be nice to people? Don't hurt people. Don't kill them. Don't own them. Just be decent. It's so easy. And this is the inspiration that they get. Speak to people good words. Okay, I don't need to understand it. I don't know what this is all about. I really don't know why people bother.
It does rhyme really well. وَقُولُوا إِنَّا وَالْحَسَنًا. The rhyme is pretty good in Arabic.
But if the rhyme is more important than the message, I'm sorry, this is pretty useless.
It's supposed to be eloquence, remember? It's the eloquence that matters.
I'm sorry. We're going to have, because I managed today, I did everything at the last minute today, but we are going to have some, the Koran Korner. So we're going to have some sentences where I would love to keep in mind. Yeah, I beat them exactly. And I'm going to ask you, what the hell is the Quran trying to tell us, really? Okay, let's go into news.
Before you do, but I think that's what we see with the Muslim apologist as well, isn't it? The case of it's kind of the rhetoric over substance. Let's see how good I don't think it's particularly good, but let's see how good a rhetoric or orator, should I say, that you are, how slickly you can polish off your script that you've well worn. But if you listen closely, there's little to no substance. So, but again, this appeals to the ears who aren't looking to think critically about this, but to accept what they already believe. So when you hear music to your ears, you're not going to go, and especially if you like that music already, well, you're not going to go and say, well, hang on a moment, let's go and check that artist and see whether, those are good notes or whatever the case is, because music puts you into this lull. And so I think it's the same with the poetry and so forth. It puts the mind into a lull state. It diminishes critical thinking, and you go into a hypnotic state, and that's kind of part of this thing. Because if you had to think critically like we are doing, well, then it doesn't work, of course.
And this is what I told Hamza Tsortzis last week. I said, look, your arguments are the same arguments that you had 10 years ago. Nothing has changed. All he's doing is he's just adding like existentialism. Okay, so if you add existential iteration of the paradigm shift, it doesn't matter what words you are adding, it does not get better. Just by adding some words, it might sound better, but the content is still the same, it's still useless. And he doesn't understand that. He says, we have progressed so much. I said, no, you haven't. Look, you're still using this funny innate thing. And you're still making it sound as though it is there, as though there's some, substance to it, when there isn't. I have conclusively shown that there isn't. I've shown the different papers and that and studies and experiments that all demonstrate and just show that this is not the case, and that they will not update their knowledge base. So it's quite weird. Anyway, let me go to the news, and this is sad news indeed, because this is from Holland, from the Netherlands, okay? And the article says, because in the most free and most tolerant country in Europe, which is Holland, the Netherlands, and that is actually true, submission is complete. They tolerated the intolerant, are now paying the price. People no longer write about political Islam. It is not mentioned, and nobody dares to speak out because they are afraid they will be killed. And the article cites several people who are or were killed, who were critical of political Islam and who were killed by Muslims or are now being threatened with being killed by Muslims. So in Holland now, you don't do this anymore. Like somebody like this guy, Mr. Wilder, I mean, I think he's a total jackass, but he's under constant threat. He's not allowed to voice his opinion because he is saying something that is not, what do you want to call it, complimentary of Islam. And he's being threatened. He has to walk around day and night with bulletproof vests and security personnel. What kind of a life is that just because you are criticizing an ideology? That's crazy. But that's the way that it is.
As you know, Stops, which you might bring up in the news about what happened here in the UK as well.
The teacher who got...
and two more have been suspended now because apparently they knew that he was going to do this and didn't stop.
That's crazy,
or whatever the case.
Isn't that crazy?
It was insane. It was insane.
Sacrifice as many as possible to appease the mob.
That's okay. It makes my blood boil, but what can you do? The only thing that we have is information, education. That's all you can do. And how long does it take to educate Muslims and to get Muslims to actually go and criticize their own? How long does it take for a Muslim to get up and say to a fellow Muslim, well, hang on, this is wrong what you're doing? And I will have one example in the Krazy Komments, by the way. So it is starting to happen. It's just, I don't know if it's going to be soon enough or whether we're really going to go down the tube and we're going to all submit to Islam simply because of fear, simply because of threats of violence, which we are no longer capable of handling. Like Holland was tolerant to the extreme, and tolerating the intolerant, well, shows you what happens.
You know, what's frustrating is that there are medieval paintings of Muhammad from Muslim empires over the centuries, and that we're ignoring that. And even today, when I went to pilgrimage in Iran and Iraq, there were depictions of Muhammad and Ali themselves. So I don't know what's this new. Again, these are old depictions, mind you. These are old artistic depictions. But now it's, what's the problem with like a depiction? And then suddenly it became so offensive that people are ready to kill.
This is quite silly, actually. The thing is, it's censorship over everything. Trying to, just shut up anybody that says anything about Islam that is not positive. And that's crazy. Do you know... Facebook, do you know that the Gin and Tonic show has received copyright strikes by an Indian publishing company, a music company, which claims that the sound made by the Gin and Tonic show belongs to them, and therefore our shows were deleted on Facebook? Because there were some Muslims who didn't like this, so they filed copyright claims, and Facebook has nothing else to do than to delete our streams, which is us talking, because some idiot in India thinks, no, we need to shut them up, we need to remove them from Facebook. That's how crazy it is.
And it's funny too, like India and Pakistan, this is where the most violent mob comes from. Ironically, this is usually the most violent mob, like they would go like, Tohine Rasul, or like, they would go, oh, you've disgraced the Prophet, and then they would go more so in internet as well as like live mob that would lynch you. Oh, and connections to Mossad. The connections to Mossad. I'm already a Mossad agent. In yesterday's comment section on Instagram, I'm already a Mossad agent.
And my check is late this month. I don't know when my check will
Again. All right. No, it's been an issue ever since COVID hit. Our checks have been late.
Oh boy, this is so crazy. Okay, and the second piece of news that I found is that the year is 1442. That's where we are in the Islamic calendar. Okay, we're in the 15th century. Ramadan, it's upon us again. It's expected to begin on Tuesday, April 13th. So, that's not this Monday, but the following Monday. So we're only like a few days away from Ramadan again. And then all the craziness will start again, where all the Muslims are going to mope and whine and, oh, it's so terrible, and I'm skipped lunch, and now what? And then stop doing it. Now, my colleagues, hardly anybody was still praying and fasting. They were not. And the supermarkets were full, and people were buying sandwiches and stuff and then going away, going home and eating in secret. Because people don't do this anymore. It's only like hardcore idiots like the IRA fundamentalists who still maintain and still are adamant that you need to skip lunch during the day during the month of Ramadan and then call it fasting. I don't know. So, yeah. Anyway, so Ramadan is supposed to happen on April the 13th and will end on Wednesday, May 12th. All right? Now, this has to be added here. It's crazy. I mean, we're in the year 1442, and you need to add, these are tentative dates, as the actual date of commencement of Ramadan is subject to the sighting of the moon.
Yeah, these are the only dates they care about for the sighting of the moon, because right now it's the month of Shaban. It's Shaban right now, and in Shaban you have like the birth of the Mahdi, and then there's the night where Muhammad goes up to the heavens. So there's
the most important day of the year.
Yeah. So again, nobody checks the moon for that, but apparently, like for Ramadan moon, there's an entire council waiting to actually check the moon, and they even take salaries. And these are just Maulvis or imams who have nothing better to do.
Wow. What we have 5-7? Yeah, okay, I'm sure somewhere. According to the Sumerian calendar. Oh no, this is the old. What was it? The Aztec or Mayas? No. The Mayas have this eternal calendar, and this is actually quite good because it works according to the rotation of the galaxy or something. That is quite amazing. So anyway, so this is the news section. What comes after the news? So let me start with this one. I need to switch this off, go here. Now, do you remember there was this stream podcast about the atheist God? And there's some comments here. So, atheists' religion, nature is their God, evolution is their revelation. Charles Darwin is their prophet. Sam Harris, or he must be Richard Dawkins, are his disciples. That's this is how
they've got to
desperate
try
they
and
are.
compare it, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
Because that's obviously how some unsophisticated minds work. You've got it because they must have a religion. They believe something like us, so therefore, what can we call a religion? We don't care what the definition of any of these words. We'll just try and equate something inaccurately, of course, so that we can sound like we're on the same playing field, and then we'll pat ourselves on the back.
Yeah,
all the while,
yeah, it's an example of a false equivalence. That's the term. And we have a group of Muslims and Pakistani atheists, and then we constantly see something like, do you worship Charles Darwin? Do you worship Sam Harris? Do you worship Richard Dawkins? Or Richard Dawkins is this character. Charles Darwin married this person. Why do you attack Muhammad? It's like, no, that's not how it works. These are not prophets. We don't look at these people as prophets. We don't have a religion. Calm down.
And just if you think that it's people like this, I showed Stops a video that's coming up on one of these live streams from the Muslim channels. Atheism dead, or atheism is dead, or something like that, right? That sort of thing. So it's not just people like this. It's even the people that run the streams that some Muslims look up to that are, just so profoundly mistaken. So what can you expect from followers and commenters like this if they're quote unquote, whoever the spokespeople are, they don't get it right? What chances the followers got?
But what they're saying in actual fact here is they are just as silly as we are. And this is quite funny. Okay, the next one. I am starting to enjoy, and this is the one I was talking about earlier. I am starting to enjoy your streams more than Hamza's streams for the obvious reasons. May Allah bless all of you for your efforts. So here's somebody who realizes that Redbeard Hamza, that the populist approach that they are running with Sabur, Abbas and Imran and people like that who are not so eloquent and not so well versed. They don't really know Islam so well, and they're not really experts in any kind of field. And people are understanding that the way that people like Sources and that they are wording their stuff more carefully, this actually is being appreciated. That's what I see here. Now, he's being
they're
chastised.
Probably in the minority, though, sadly. But more of them.
But it is happening. I mean, it's very seldom that you see this kind of thing. And he's immediately chastised, okay? Immediately somebody says, you're not allowed to criticize Hamza. But it is starting, and this is very welcome, a sign for me that there are people who are looking at the different quality levels of the people, and it's not only quantity over quality. So our people do appreciate it. So few and far between, but it is there. So this is the opposite again. So this is Anthony Flew. There is a God. How the world's most notorious atheist changed his mind. And an old guy is standing in front of a waterfall and suddenly decides there's a God. And so what?
And we have so many of these stories. I've been constantly bombarded with stories like, oh, this person converted. Oh, this person was an atheist who converted. And then when you read their story, it just doesn't add up.
Yeah, but they are forgetting that in the same time that they are talking about this. I don't know if you've read about this, that in Egypt, 4 million Muslims left Islam. 24% of the youths outside of Islamic countries are leaving Islam. So Islam is collapsing, and it's collapsing quite fast. The people are leaving Islam in droves. This is why you get this propaganda. Yeah, it's the fastest growing religion. No, it is not. It's the fastest collapsing religion. This is why I find it quite ironic when people are coming to me and saying, yeah, look, this and so converted. Well, big deal. During that conversion, you lost 10,000 Muslims. Now what? So what's the point?
I think the other thing is, notorious is typically something that's famous for something bad. What was he bad before while he was an atheist? Was he bad now? So I'm not too sure where the notorious comes from, but all one can say is perhaps Anthony Flew was mistaken or confused or whatever, especially in his later years. Perhaps at that stage, you're not functioning as you would when you're somewhat younger. Not everybody's like that, but that could well have been his thing. And even if somebody does convert, if Richard Dawkins converted tomorrow to some version of theism, that wouldn't in any way, unless he provided a good argument, they wouldn't give me a moment's pause, not a single moment's pause, unless he provided something which I could then evaluate. But the fact that he changed his mind doesn't mean that we should. But that's the thinking, isn't it? Hey, if somebody that's well-known does it, well, then you guys should follow, because that's what we do. We follow what we're told.
Exactly. The celebrity thinking as well. And here's somebody who commented on my appearance on this stream. And they can't handle it, really. They cannot handle it. Instead of addressing my arguments, instead of addressing what I said, they have to say he sounds a little similar to spiritual atheists. I don't know who this is. I've never met spiritual atheists, never bumped into him. But he is actually someone else. Fred, a.k.a. Stop Spamming, is some old fanatical atheist. That's what I am. I'm an old fanatical atheist. So an old fanatical atheist is capable of immediately destroying Islam in a couple of seconds, and all these young non-fanatical Muslims can do nothing about it. They don't understand this. So who is obsessed with Hamza and the Aira team? This is correct. When they are going crazy, making claims like crazy, then this does rub me up the wrong way, and then I react. Sure, if they would stop that, that's it. Like somebody, Subur said, and this is quite silly, he says, Hamza is living rent-free in my brain. I mean, that is so cliche. And I said
Richard
to him,
Dawkins is living rent-free in his. I mean, anybody can make a trivially true statement or a trivial statement about something.
Exactly.
Anybody you think about or any concept you have is living rent-free. I mean, what a trivial statement to make. So, when you go to bed, you think of Richard Dawkins. When you're actually praying to Muhammad, hey, good evening, James. So when you're praying to Muhammad, is Richard Dawkins also, alongside him there as a challenge to Muhammad or something? Just a silly statement to make, right?
And then he says he used to troll some of the previous live streams with his lame jokes. Okay, I think he's a bit annoyed by the online reach of the Dawah nowadays and is looking for some clout for whatever atheist shows he is a part of. Now, the funny thing is, I'm only doing one thing, and that is the Gin and Tonic show. And the Gin and Tonic show is not an atheist show. We have Muslims, we have Christians, we have... Oh, where's Thunder, by the way? He's not here. So we have different people from different walks of life, from different belief systems. All we have in common is that we are looking at political Islam. We're looking at the ways that Islam is affecting our lives in the 21st century. And that is all that we are doing. So we're not looking for clout. We're not looking for anything. It's not an atheist show, but it shows how scared they are of atheists. It's quite weird. And he says he is not spiritual atheist because SA, I don't know who SA is, has a typically strong, spiritual atheist, has a typically strong Indian accent. Oh, good golly, he's not the same person, is he?
Wait, who's SA?
I thought it was South Africa, but maybe you're right, spiritual atheist.
Oh, spiritual atheist.
Because I always just see SA in capitals as South Africa as a short.
Yeah, me too.
Wait. How does Stops have an Indian accent?
No, he doesn't. They're confused.
I have an Indian accent. Not Stops.
On my birthday, I look through the window.
Well, before we continue, guys, let's welcome James in, because I'm sure he'll have some interesting things to say on some of the comments. Hey, James. Good evening. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you.
Hi, James.
Hello.
We're just going through some crazy comments we found under some videos like this one. Speaker Park is the best place. What a fantastic
Hyde Park or Speaker's Corner, but I guess if you just take one of each word and put them together, it kind of means the same thing.
And I don't know how many people are aware that Rob started a Facebook group called Speaker's Corner Free Speech. And this has gone from 0 to, I don't know where it is now, 1,000, 2,000, I don't know. There's dozens joining every single day because they think this is the Muslim Speaker's Corner or something. They don't even realize what it is. quite surprised, but it's amazing how they like this. Okay, then we have somebody who's telling me I am the problem because I am exactly what he is refuting. Because I showed him a couple of mosques that are not pointing towards Mecca, old mosques especially. They don't like that. They need to be shown that all the mosques are pointing towards Mecca, and I showed him some that are not. So, you claim that the claim that all mosques face Mecca is false based on Google Earth. That's what I showed him. And the argument is, well, Google Earth didn't exist then.
Nor did computers.
You don't even understand his claim. You can't use modern coordinates that didn't exist in the 7th century. Oh, goodness, I think this is so funny. How can people like this exist in the 21st century? I don't know. This is beyond me, really. I don't know. Okay. Oh boy. Anyway, this was quite funny, I thought. So let us go into the next segment quickly. Now here, I hope we're going to make this a little bit shorter.
It's puzzling. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
Because now what we're doing is we're going to take a look at the Quran. Now the problem is that if we start discussing every single sentence, it's going to take a long time. So maybe what we should do is that we should just take 10 sentences and not use all of them, because if we go through all of them, this is going to take a hell of a long time. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, no, I think
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. And we're doing Surah Yunus, I believe?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Let me just give you this one. Application window. There we go. Can I make this bigger? Oh, shit. You see, now with this boom, it's actually quite difficult to operate the...
Just so you know, Stops has got himself a fancy boom. He's all set up in like a professional studio there. It cost millions. That's where you hear his great voice come out to the world from.
Don't listen to him. He's talking absolute nonsense. Yes. Okay. I think that's big enough, right?
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah.
Okay. So we're looking at, indeed, chapter 10, which is Yunus, which is Jonah. Remember, Jonah is the guy that was eaten by a big fish / whale or something, and then joined up with the Pharaoh from Egypt, who was saved from drowning, and they joined up in Nineveh to save the people there, to convert them. And this Jonah has his own chapter in the Quran. Now, sentence 1, ALR.
Alif Lam Ra.
This is the guidance that you get from the Quran.
Yeah, the Arabic is Alif, then they stretch it, right? Alif Lam Ra.
Yeah, to give it some sort of sense. Yeah. Now, just to explain to people who have not seen this before, what I do is I go through the Quran sentence by sentence, and I try and capture the essence of what the sentences actually say. So it's not actually a tafsir or something, it's just my personal interpretation. And what I do is I go through the Quran and I look at what it says and try and put myself in the situation of the people, and try to find, using different versions, interpretation, commentaries, and to actually get some sort of meaning out of this. In this case, it says in the Quran itself, these verses book-wise. Now, if you go and look at the translations, you will see that this is actually a sentence. But the sentence, if you go and look at the roots, don't exist. You only have these verses book-wise. Now, you are tasked as a translator with making sense out of this. So what do you do? What do you take these 4 words to mean? So they fabricate stuff. And there's going to be one sentence a little bit later on where this is taken to extreme. If you read the original and you read the translations, or rather the interpretations, you're just going to facepalm. You're going to think, what the hell is going on? So sentence number 2, we revealed to a man that he warn others and confirm believers will be near their God. Non-believers said he's... sorry?
Oh, no, carry on. Sorry, we'll come back to it. You just jumped on quite quick. Go ahead.
No, actually, just do 10.1. Just go to the root, just to show people that I'm not talking shit, okay? He says, these verses... So it's ALR,
right.
and then...
Alif Lam Ra, and then...
These verses...
Verses, because they put the in the middle, too.
It doesn't exist in the Quran. So
in the Arabic,
verses, the book, the wise.
Of the book.
But look at this, right? ALR. And then if you go to tafsirs, I just happened to do up to them. Al-Jalalain. God knows best what he means by these. Kasani. As for Alif Lam, they've already been mentioned. Okay, listen to this. Those that is, what is being alluded to by these letters is the pillars of the universal book that contains wisdom, or the one whose differentiations have been set clear and precise. And please explain that gibberish to me. And because now the brain will pick out, right? If you're a Muslim, the brain will pick out of this gibberish sentences those last few words, set, clear, and precise. No, I'm putting myself in the mindset of a Muslim because this would kind of be gibberish to me. But hang on, I hear those 2 words at the end. I like those, right? Clear and precise.
And when I was
Nobody knows what these words actually mean.
when I was a Muslim, right, I always asked the meaning of the letters, right? The Alif Lam Mim, the Alif Lam Ra, Ha Mim, and no one had an answer. No one wanted to provide an answer, or they were said, oh, God knows best.
Yeah, it's speculation,
exactly.
isn't it?
It was pure speculation, and the fact that it's what I've been recently looking at is like maybe the letters have some sort of like significance, but one would have to dig into like linguistic history in itself to see what they mean. So, but in the sense that they might have some magic potence or something like that.
Well, there's 29 of them, and the
Yeah.
only attempt at a meaning I've heard by Rashad Khalifa in Phoenix, Arizona, who came up with the 19 miracle, who says they are required as a justification to make the 19 miracle work, because without those, then there will be an offset. But you need this ALR to make it 19. I mean, it still doesn't work. It's bullshit. But this is an attempt at making some sense out of those. So, yeah. Okay. So, number 3. And now, I'm sorry, the second one. We revealed to a man that he warned others and confirmed believers will be near their God, whatever that may mean. Non-believers said he's a magician. Now, if you go to the translations, you will see that I thought I was laughing out loud, and I looked at 15 different translations, and everybody says something very, very different. So if you go, thanks, Rob, if you go to Sahih International, okay, but the disbelievers say, indeed, this is an obvious magician, that this is an evident sorcerer. But look at the sentence before, that they will have precedence of honor with their Lord, and give the good news they have before their Lord the lofty rank of truth. Where the hell is this in the Quran? It's not there. So where do you get this lofty Lord of truth and honor with their Lord? It doesn't say anything. It's just a respectable position near their Lord. Now, how can you be near God? You can't conceive of God. You can't materialize this being, and you can't be nearer or further away. That's impossible. But the translators are making a huge thing about this, and inventing and creating things which are not in the Quran. And this is the problem, that a lot of people who are not paying attention, just was what Rob said, they will read over this and they will see something that they like, and they will then remember this. Oh, you see, that's what it says in the Quran. Now, I myself I was tricked into this a couple of days ago when somebody said, well, Muhammad is the messenger of God. And I said, well, I'm not sure it says that in the Quran. And he says, yes, it does. Look here in 43:29 or something. There it says it. And he showed me in the Quran, and indeed it says it. But it's a translation. If you go to the original, it doesn't say it. And this is what I remembered. I remember the original. This is why I said, I don't think that... no, it wasn't this one. What was it?
Okay.
43:129. Is there a thing as 43:129?
No, it doesn't get
I
that
don't
far.
think so. Yeah.
No.
Then
Okay,
I
doesn't
got
matter.
49:30. I can't remember. Anyway, it was the last sentence in this chapter, because it did not say the original. I remember the original, but not the translation. And somebody showed me a translation, and there it said Muhammad is the messenger of God. And I said, oh, sorry, then I was wrong, but I wasn't, because this was just fabricated.
It just said the
And
messenger,
this-
not his name, right? And they just take the name to be the same.
Well, it's actually a lot worse. It actually says there's only 3 words in the sentence, which is praise, message, God. Those are the 3 words. And from this, they are creating Muhammad was the messenger of God, even though it doesn't say that. The original...
Even the translation itself is dishonest because they're adding
Yes.
the words in the Arabic itself.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. And I fell for it, because if you're in a discussion, you don't always remember all the references that you've ever read. And I was unable to focus on this at the moment. And then I made the mistake of not taking my time and reading and demanding I see the original, the corpus. Poof, there you go. And this is exactly what Rob just pointed out. And it happened so fucking quick. Happened so quickly, Anyway.
I think there is an example of where it says Muhammad is a messenger in a 3144 on corpus.quran. It's got like Muhammadun, and it says, and not Muhammadun except a messenger.
3144, eh?
Yeah.
Let's have a quick look here.
And the problem is, if you look at the linguistics, Muhammadun does not mean Muhammad. It means praise.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they've translated it to Muhammad here, but there's the word Muhammadun over there. And they've translated it to Muhammad in here.
Yeah, so
And
it's
if you-
Muhammadun, the word, yeah.
And if you replace that with praise, then the sentence makes sense.
So, but there's some other examples where I don't think praise makes as much sense. Like, in 33:40, it says, "Muhammad is not the father of any of your men, but the messenger of Allah."
That's the exception. Correct.
Okay.
Correct. That is the only exception where Muhammad actually, but I think this one is not Muhammadun, it's Muhammadin, isn't it? Can you go to the root? I think
Can
this
I
one
see?
is different.
Oh, it's
Yeah, there's also
Muhammadun. This is also Muhammadun.
It's also Muhammadun. Because I remember there was one exception where it's Muhammadin or something. And here you're right. Here I would say it makes more sense to actually put the name Muhammad and not the function of praise. Yeah, absolutely, James. Yeah.
For example,
But anyway, it's very difficult to keep all these in mind, which one is what and where's what. So the way that I maintain is the Muhammad itself in this combination of letters exists only 4 times in the entire Quran, and 3 of them are praise and 1 of them refers to the person, and that's it.
I think as long as they got one of them right, but it is very few, and one would again wonder
Yeah.
why it's a few, presumably. But then they're going to infer things. I'll tell you a story later because we've done the inheritance area again a little bit on Discord, and I've fine tuned it even more. I'm kind of fine tuning it even more when I get the responses in. And I'll tell you about this, how you infer things. You're going to love this, but I'll save that for the end. Just if you remind me at the very end, I'll tell you a story that'll keep people watching, because we're going to go into some stuff here with yourself and James are going to give us some great info, which will be obviously quite nuanced and so forth. So I'll tell you a story at the end because it allows the brain then to relax after taking in all the great stuff. So remind me about that.
Okay. All right, sentence number 3. Lord Allah created heavens and earth in 6 days and then sat on the throne. Worship him. Straightforward.
Yeah, so
Number
they talk
4.
about 6 days, obviously, yeah, instead of 7. But
Well, there's 2 different
Well, they had a
versions. One is 6 days, the other one is 8 days. So,
Okay.
it's different ways.
this one is
the
more
same.
closely in the rest. Okay, yeah.
It's like there's this contradictory sort of accounts here.
Quite why he has to rest, we don't know, but okay.
Yeah.
Being all powerful does take its toll, I guess, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
but okay, if you look at the translations, again, we don't want to waste time on this. If you look at it, they are totally different, because then he sat on the throne, and then look at what it says. Oh, you brought it up anyway. Okay. Because now he's arranging the matter, doing things which is not in the original, disposing the affairs. Well, there you go.
Hey guys.
So he's not resting.
Good evening.
Hello in the nick of time. This demon, welcome, demon.
Hello, Mr. Nick.
Yeah, so sorry for the delay. I don't know why, but my house lost its fuses. The fuses blew, so I have to go all the way down to the hardware store, grab some extra fuses, and fix it. And
Allah wanted to keep you quiet, you see.
I know.
Worship him. Number 4, you will return to him. Oh, really? And the creation process is repeated. Now, I've been trying to get the creation process out of Muslims now for a couple of weeks now, and I've gone absolutely nowhere. Because no single Muslim can give me the creation process of a human being. They always refer to Dr. Keith Moore, the Nutfa and the Alaka and the Mugda, but nobody can tell me the process. So, I don't know. Anyway, it's repeated. And then believers will be rewarded, and non-believers will drink boiling fluids, and then get painfully punished. I don't know how this works. This is like, there's a sentence where you will be crucified, tortured for, and then you will be punished.
There's even a narration. I think it's an oral narration where the liquid we'll be drinking is sheep's blood that we'll be drinking, which will be boiled.
Somebody's mic is playing up there. Whoever's mic
Okay,
is
this
that?
is totally gone.
You or
I think your mic, you're walking and your mic is banging against something.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Mustafa's
that was
mic,
me.
I think.
That was me. Yes, that was me.
But this is an all-merciful God or a most merciful God or whatever you want to say, right?
Yeah.
Except in certain circumstances which would make it not all merciful. But let's just ignore that small triviality.
But I like that you will first drink the boiling fluids and then you will get painfully punished. But please realize something. This book, half of it, is not addressing and not providing guidance to believers. It's addressing non-believers. It's constantly telling us non-believers all the things that we are going to get and experience and so. But why is it so obsessed with non-believers? Anyway, sentence 5. He made the sun a glowing light and the moon a light. Now, I put there Allah equals light of the heavens and the earth, because a lot of people, like from Zakir, and I shouldn't do the Indian accent. He says that this is a reflected light. So this word
if you
nur.
want, I can do the Indian accent for you.
No, this is a joke from earlier, because somebody accused me of being an Indian. That's why I'm not allowed to do the Indian accent.
Well, I'm actually Indian, and I give you permission if you want.
Thank you. So anyway, so a lot of people say that the moon is a reflected light. And this is, Zakir Naik was quite famous for saying this. Now, he forgets that in another sentence in the Quran, the same word, which is nur, which is Allah, is the nur of the heavens and the earth. So it's not... Then Muhammad is the shiny, the glowing light, and Allah is the reflected light of the heavens and the earth. So, you need to be a little bit consistent here if you want to make the one a reflected one. So this is what I'm pointing out here. And then made phases so you know what the time is. So there you go.
Yeah, like for me, like that's pretty... It's pretty unacceptable for me even back when it's written, because they had astronomy well before when this was written, and everyone thinks Galileo invented the telescope, but he's the first one to put it into the sky and find planets. But using telescopes into the sky or glass fragments to actually look into the sky to magnify was a common thing back then. It's not new, so I don't know why they would have something like this written in the first place.
Mm.
Yeah, what's his name? Hamza Sources did a presentation where he decided, after enough kind of battering from various bloggers, that most of these kind of scientific miracles kind of can't be defended at all, and so he just debunks them all in front of an audience of Muslims and says, "Yeah, don't try and use these for dawah anymore. Kind of, it's all stupid." And he included this one and said, "Yeah, how can you say that kind of nur means reflected light, and this is kind of a miracle of advanced knowledge, when nur means sort of just light, Allah's light in the Quran." And he also pointed out that I think ancient Greeks kind of several of them knew that it was that the moon was just reflecting light from the sun.
And I complimented him last week on this, and somebody called Subur did not like this at all, because I said, thank you, Hamza, for doing that, because it takes intellectual honesty to do that. And you are one of the only one out of the group here that actually has this and did this. And Subur took exception to this. Anyway, so number 6, night and day are signs. Oh, really? What's that? What are signs of what? Well, the night is dark and day is not, and I don't know where the sign is. But it's not for non-believers.
Yeah, but
it's incredibly potent. Yeah.
The alternation of the night and day, what Allah has created in the heavens and the earth, are signs to the people who fear Allah. Yeah, but what signs? The fact that it goes dark and goes light again.
Exactly.
But I mean, that's so trivial, because by that stage, anything. Hang on, if it was only light, would that also be Allah? Would that appeal to Satan? If it was only darkness, would that mean it's Satan? I mean, we do know that there's planets that don't orbit, turn on the orbit to face their own star. It's a bit like the moon, right? The moon turns in a clockwise way rather than if you look down from the top. So that's why we always see the light side of the moon. But I think they found planets that orbit the sun but turn in the same way as the moon turns around the earth, in the sense that it turns always facing the sun. So there's always a bright side and a dark side. And if if you could survive on that, depending on how far away it is from the sun, would that be a sign? I mean, these are just such trivial statements, aren't they? Why would you put something like this?
You call this rotation locked, and you have a lot of moons doing that. Anyway, so it's signs, and then number 7 says, but not for non-believers. So non-believers, they don't understand night and day. I mean, this is totally beyond me. What the hell is night and day? I don't understand these things. So, because I was created to not understand it, and I was created not to realize and recognize the signs, I'm going to go to hell. So I am being
Let me
sent
just ask
to
you guys
hell.
something at this point. Can I just get a quick poll from all of you guys? Why is it? This seems fairly clear to me. Well, as clear as the Quran can be. Okay, that's not the highest standard to use. But why is it that Muslims still think that non-believers have got a chance of going to heaven, i.e., avoiding the fire, when so often in the Quran it talks about this in what seems to be a pretty straightforward way here? So, what
I
do you
think
guys
it's
think about it?
I think it's a forced conversion thing that they used back in the day. You're all going to hell unless you follow what we say.
No, but why do they say today that they don't know? I hear Muslims, not all of them granted, but some of them saying, well, we don't know. Is that purely because Muhammad didn't know? Or is there some other reason that they think that there's a chance that if this was all true, that us as non-Muslims would go to heaven? It doesn't seem to be, a good case to be made for all of these sort of verses that seem to be fairly clear that, the non-believers are going to hell or going to fire, if you want to make those two synonymous.
I think what they're having, at least in the modern age, they're having a hard time rationalizing that the belief aspect is important. That your actions, your good actions or bad actions, become irrelevant whether you believe or not. So I think they're trying to rationalize it, and they're kind of failing to do so. And it's the lack of familiarity with their own scripture and their own book. That is, they haven't even read their own book.
And I think it's also pick and choose.
That. Yeah, it's partly those things. And for some of them, it'll also be a type of apologetic in that it's kind of more convenient for them to say, well, we don't, only Allah knows who's going to heaven or hell. It's easier to say that to someone in front of a crowd of non-Muslims than to say to a crowd of non-Muslims, if all of us suddenly got hit by a helicopter crash, then all you guys would be burning in hell, but I wouldn't. So, yeah.
Muhammad said that every son of Adam will enter the fire. Is there a verse in the Quran about that? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Or is it in the Hadith?
No, it's in the Quran and the Hadith. In the Quran, it's just a side sentence, and the Hadith, it's mentioned several times.
Well, that seems to be fairly clear that you're going to. But like James says,
but it's just a short time. You see, this is always the cop out. There's no compulsion in religion, but the non-believer will go to hell. So this is a contradictory statement because it also says your deeds will count and not just your belief. So what they're doing is they're picking and choosing and saying, well, at this moment in time, I will just simply ignore, because it says this 100. I found another one. It's 106 times that it says this in the Quran, that non-believers will go to hell. And it actually says it forever, eternally, all right? And they are ignoring this, and they will rather go to one sentence which is more vague and more ambiguous, which says, well, your deeds will count towards your rewards. And therefore, they are then saying, well, there you go, not everybody goes to hell. And if it is, then only for a short time. And then even non-believers have a chance to make it because the deeds will count towards it. So
yeah, but I mean, your deeds would only count in Judgment Day, and if you're still judged to be going to hell, then that's it. I mean, I don't know how they infer that from there you've still got a chance of coming out again, or at least it's a short time. But here's the other thing here, right? Look at the bottom of this. They've earned this evil, or we've earned this, or whatever the case is. How is it that you earn something? Presumably to earn it, you'd know that you were wrong and you've actively worked towards this. I mean, presumably ignorant people don't earn this evil.
No.
Then
This
again,
is the
if God
definition
is
of the
all-knowing,
kafir.
How do you earn something that is already the case?
But remember the definition of a kafir. That is somebody who actively covers the truth. That is the definition of kafir. So you are actively covering the truth, and therefore you need to be punished.
Well, you'd have to establish that's the truth in order to cover it, which I think we're all agreed has never been done.
Yeah, but now you're being logical. You can't do that.
All right, let's finish it off.
They will go to hell.
James. Wait, stops. Go on, James.
I think another reason why kind of modern Muslims are kind of tempted by this idea of maybe non-Muslims might not go to hell is because there's that hadith that says that Muhammad saw a prostitute give a thirsty dog some water, and then apparently he says, oh, this woman has just saved herself from the fire, and this woman was like still presumably a polytheist, and so, but like, I mean, it's kind of like a contradictory piece of teaching, right? Because in Islam it says plenty of times, in the Quran it says plenty of times that polytheism and associating partners with Allah is the worst evil possible in Islam, and so you wouldn't expect kind of committing the worst evil punishable to be undone by kind of feeding a dog. And so it just seems like kind of Muhammad's kind of like, sometimes he's feeling like being merciful and saying, oh, maybe non-Muslims can go to hell. Other times he's feeling like saying, oh, no, non-Muslims are going to go to hell. Because there's also some verses in the Quran that kind of imply that Christians and Jews will sort of, that they will not grieve on Judgment Day, something along those lines. So it's pretty inconsistent, like many parts of Islam.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so non-believers will go to hell. Believers will have rivers beneath them in paradise. Okay, this must be some idiom. This must be some metaphorical thing that people at the time understood. Today we don't understand this anymore, but this must have been quite common because I see this description a lot.
Well, obviously they're out in the desert, aren't they? So rivers are life-giving. It's something that you move towards.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, exactly.
Would be something
like that.
You'd look for. But I'm not sure if you believed already, and you've done righteous deeds, then I'm not sure. This seems superfluous to me. Why would the Lord guide you because of their faith? I mean, you're already believing, so presumably, well, in the case of Islam, you have to have faith because you wouldn't believe for good reasons. That wouldn't be the case. But if you believed, i.e. you had faith, and you had done righteous deeds, then why would he do this part unless you actually didn't have free will and this was all just a joke? But this part seems superfluous, or this part seems superfluous. So just get rid of that and say just because the Lord will guide them in their faith. But these two together seem like it's unnecessary. You could do away with one part of that sentence and just have the beneath them the rivers, and it doesn't seem to be useful for that. But maybe they just got to throw that in to remind them who's doing this. It can't be out of your own free will, even though you're supposed to have it. Somehow God's got a hand in that, even though he's omniscient and is not supposed to have a hand in it in some way.
Yeah, I think it's confirmation, mainly. Okay, and the last one is they will say praise, glory, peace. And that's it. Peace out.
Yeah.
And I think we leave it there for today. Otherwise, it's
Sounds
going
good.
to be too long.
We've got a full panel and we're going to have plenty to say now. We've got an hour plus. But I think you want to play that video first, don't you, Stops, to set the scene?
I want to play a quick video to set the scene, indeed, which is, where did I put it? Here.
Who is this man called Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, in the desert 1400 years ago, making a claim that an angel came to a cave and told him he's a messenger to mankind? Test that claim. Is he lying about this claim? Is he crazy delusional about this claim? Has he been deceived into this claim? Or is he telling the truth? Test the claim. Can you think of another possibility before we continue? And all you need to do is test that claim. Honestly, who is this guy? Is he someone who could be trusted? And would he lie? Would he make it out? Did he have some secret motivation? Did he have the capacity, a capability to do what he's being accused of doing?
So I think just before you carry on there, Stops, the one thing to notice, go watch that video if you haven't. It's on one of the channels there. I'm not sure which one. But oftentimes it's like Tom there was kind of hypnotized by all of this. If you go watch it, to me, there's not a lot of critical thinking. And when James goes on or Stops, or I think Mustafa, I don't know if Mustafa's been on, I think Nick has been on, whoever it is, I've been on, etc. once. You just notice the difference between those who ask questions and who like critically take apart what's being said, and those that follow along. And unfortunately, when I remember watching that, the guy Tom, he was almost there, right? It's like he's on the precipice already. All they need to do is like blow, and he'll hop over. So there was no critical thinking or questions that were asked there that any of us would have asked. He just kind of accepted. It was like you were in an assembly and you're having poetry read to you, and you're not thinking, well, okay, does this make sense? You're just letting it wash over you because you like the sound of it.
Yeah, I think the people who sort of are in that state of being quite suggestible and sort of just going along with it, not kind of being critical and sort of suspicious and skeptical, those types of people who don't have that sort of skeptical mindset when someone starts telling them things, you'll find that the same type of people kind of end up, believing in sort of new age cults or like kind of, the kinds of people who believe that you can sort of cure cancer by eating apples, or that they might believe in conspiracy theories. And so I've seen a couple of examples of these sort of street conversion videos where a Dawa stool will kind of find a person to sort of convert. And it becomes like clear over the course of the conversation that the person they're speaking to basically isn't all there. And they used to be sort of part of a kind of hippie cult, and that was their thing for a while. And then, they're still not being kind of at all skeptical when someone comes and tells them about Muhammad. So, the kind of people who, if someone comes and tells you like, hey, we know someone who spoke to God, like normally you'd sort of, be skeptical about that. But, unfortunately, like some people kind of, they just aren't in that frame of mind.
Yeah. Much easier with them because obviously they're not going to put up much resistance, and they're going to kind of go along with it. Might ask a question here or there, whereas the five of us here would be asking from the get-go, you made this claim, you made that claim, but they just sort of go with it. As you say, James, I think because there's a bias to already believe some of that sort of stuff, not Islam particularly, but some of the bigger claims, they're already sort of, on that side of the fence, so they're not going to ask any questions about that.
Yeah, but also, look how much time he gets, because he is not putting up such a fight. He's not asking critical questions. Correct. We get seconds before we're interrupted. He gets hours. And this is the difference. If they see a chance, if they see there's a door or crack open that they can jump into, then they give you enormous amounts of time because they think they're going to, be able to do something here. Whereas if you or I come on with, then, they're not going to be that lenient. They're immediately going to shut us down.
Yeah, they're on the defensive, right? And the defensive includes making sure that you don't say too much, because otherwise it might appear as if you might have a strong point. So when you do have a strong point, to counter that, you've got to interrupt incessantly to break up the point so you don't get your full point out. You and James are great examples where you can't get your points out, and to talk over you, and then multiple of them jump in, because this is the rhetorical tactic that the gullible minds are easily influenced by. They don't get to hear the full point, and they hear the other guys shouting loudly, jumping in, and that to them in their gullibility sounds like these guys are doing a good job, when in fact, if you listen for the content, they're saying nothing of consequence.
Yeah, I think it's more of them hating intellectual discourse. Any idea that challenges their belief, they're kind of threatened by. So, they make sure that it doesn't happen, especially live. So I think it's all pre-planned.
And this is an interesting concept, because Lafayette Hubbard actually did this. He made up a religion to profit from it. And this is an interesting concept and idea that might apply to Muhammad. And because there are so many different options, what I did is I sort of came up with this concept, with this structure, with this idea, what we're going to do over the next 5 weeks, looking at the theme of the month, looking at what Muhammad is, where we have first, we look at the facts, then we look at the roles, we look at the worship, the way that it was yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We look at Muhammad in history and look at all the claims versus reality, and then Muhammad and his role today. So this is the kind of a structure that I proposed, just so that we have somewhere where we can run along with. So we can adjust this as we go along. But if anybody has any ideas, anything that they want to add, then please go ahead. Now, what I like to do is, because we have so many great guys with all this wisdom and knowledge and everything, what is it that we actually know about Muhammad? If I bring this back again and we look at this, then we look facts as presented in the standard narrative. And then what we need to do is, at the end, we're going to stop it in 45 minutes to answer Redbeard Hamza's classification of liar, lunatic, delusional, or whatever the case may be. So we're going to look at these things on the right-hand side. Muhammad is seen or claimed by Hamza. Test the claims. Is he lying, crazy, delusional, deceived, or is it the truth? So what kind of ideas do we have today? What is it that we can say today about Muhammad? Okay, let's start with Rob. Rob, what do you know about the standard narrative of Muhammad? What have you been told? What do you remember?
About his life, you mean?
Yes.
Or from the man, well, obviously that he was a what do you call it, a merchant. Seems like, again, this is the narrative that he was this honest merchant. Well, according to Hamza, which again, we need to see the evidence for, but the people used to leave their stuff with him. He was the honest one. He was the trusted one. I mean, he was just such an amazing guy prior to all of this. And then obviously he heard a voice in a cave, and that's where this whole idea started. And according to the Muslims, including Hamza, he's just been this amazing guy that couldn't possibly have been delusional, crazy, or anything else. It must be the truth. And all of these people followed. And of course, he had all these revelations and all these amazing prophecies and just all things about reality that just couldn't have been the case if it was a simple man.
Okay. Let me go clockwise. Mustafa, what do you know?
What do I know about Muhammad from the standard narrative, or what do I know now, or what?
Standard narrative.
Standard narrative. Okay. There's something similar to what Rob just said, but there's something interesting I noted. Muhammad apparently wrestled his uncle, apparently, and that was a miracle. That was supposedly a miracle. This is in the Ibn Ishaq, Ibn Hisham autobiography. And he also pulled out a tree. And I also noticed that he started preaching his message, but then he started, when he moved out, like he was forced to leave Mecca, and then he went to Medina because he was accepted there. He was supposed to solve this dispute between the Aus and the Khazraj. And basically what he did was he created this constitution of Medina that all Jews and everybody lives peacefully. But then shit goes downhill from there. Then we have the 3 battles, the Badr, Uhud, then we have Khandaq. Then we have multiple battles, actually. Like there's more. Different campaigns, different military campaigns. Ali is the hero, especially in the battles of Khandaq and Khaybar. And Ali is his second-hand man, practically, because Ali is, even he's declared as a successor towards the end. So, and then that's where the conflict started. But yeah, that's the standard narrative that, he left his city and then came back, reconquered it, and then apparently he killed nobody. Supposedly he killed nobody except 4 people or 5 people that were allowed to be killed. One of them was Ibn Sahar, and I think 2 of them were female poets. Then that's the standard narrative. And then he was poisoned by somebody, a Jewess or something like that. And then he had his last sermon, and then he died. And Omar. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of characters to play with, because he died in Aisha's lap, his child bride's lap, and by that time she was 18. So yeah, that's the standard narrative, and then that's where the issue of inheriting his leadership comes from, whether it was Omar, Abu Bakr, or Ali.
And that is why in the Quran, actually, this is what people don't realize, is this is why the orphanage, if you were adopting a man, you were no longer allowed to, because this led to exactly what Mustafa was just saying. This led to this huge dilemma that Ali was supposed to be his successor because he adopted him. This is why it had to be cancelled out of the Quran again. So this was quite funny.
And Ali was raised like his son, even though he's the son of Abu Talib. Abu Talib was the one who raised Muhammad. Abu Talib is his uncle. And he's there's this big line. They're kind of royals in a way, Hashemi, the Hashim tribe. And they're part of the Quraysh tribe, the bigger Quraysh tribe, but then there's sub-tribes. But then there's this rivalry between the Hashim tribe and the Umayyad tribe. And the Umayyad tribe leader is Abu Sufyan at this time.
Yeah. But just as a by the way, because a friend of mine was a Hashemi, I was actually allowed inside the palace in Tehran at the time, because Faradiba was a Hashemi, and this is why this is quite funny. I was actually allowed in there at the time. Okay, next on the clockwise, James, what can you add?
Well, I guess it depends to what confidence you say when you say kind of no. So like the standard narrative kind of mainly comes from one biographer, which kind of is not ideal when you want to verify something historically. There aren't any sort of biographies from like non-Muslim sources. kind of the only non-Muslim source kind of just mentions his name kind of in like a page about a battle, kind of when the Arabs start invading Syria and thereabouts. So, but I still kind of, I'm not a complete Muhammad kind of mythicist. I think kind of it's when you look at the Quran, because the Quran's quite an early document, and the Quran does have many chapters that have a very kind of personal character to them, like they're relating to one person's kind of particular circumstances, like marriage squabbles in chapter 66, where kind of Muhammad or the author of the Quran kind of threatens two women that God will punish them for being such disobedient wives, that sort of thing. And so I think kind of given that the Quran, several verses of the Quran seem to line up with such a self-serving kind of things that kind of just would only benefit like the author of the Quran, things that would only benefit the Muhammad himself if he made the Quran. I think that does kind of point a bit more to kind of there being some sort of historical Muhammad, but his life has been sort of heavily embellished and that sort of thing. I mean verses like saying that, you wives kind of like you kind of wives of Muhammad in particular, kind of you aren't allowed to remarry after he dies, and things like you wives of the messenger, you aren't allowed to remarry after he dies. That's obviously like self-serving and would only really benefit to the author of the Quran in particular. Same with like the verse that's if you check kind of the wives of Muhammad, they aren't allowed to remarry after he dies, which is like an act of petty jealousy. And so a few verses like that kind of indicate to me that there was some sort of historical Muhammad, but the obviously I kind of try and use the criteria of embarrassment which historians use, which is that if you have some historical sources being written by one side, like one ideological side or national side or religious side, that they will have a bias to try and portray it positively, which means that if there are any reports that they provide which are embarrassing, then that makes them more credible, because they would have an incentive to kind of embellish things that make them look good. But if it's something embarrassing, then kind of the only reason they'd kind of write that would be if it makes it more likely that it actually happened, basically.
Although, James, if somebody was quite a smart Arab at the time, they could do that precisely because they think that might be the thought process. Hey, if we put a few things then that maybe doesn't cast such a good light, it'll make it more human, and therefore, otherwise it might look too perfect. So I don't know how you might get around that if there was a very, very smart person. I mean, if they weren't so smart, then I agree. But I don't know if one could rule out that somebody could do that precisely for the reasons that you put in, which makes it look more realistic.
And there's some Islamic scholars do agree that there were follies, like such as the satanic verses incident was added, sort of like giving him a sort of a hero's journey. So, giving him more flaws because he's appearing too perfect. And also James mentioned chapter 66 as well. There's even two interpretations of the wives being threatened. One is that, the Sunni interpretation where Aisha or Hafsa caught him cheating with Maria al-Qibta, and then, this was used as a threat. The second interpretation, which is the Shia interpretation, the general Asna Ashari Shia interpretation, is that he had a secret which he told Hafsa about declaring Ali as his successor, and then she told Aisha, and then Aisha spread the message before it was even to be revealed. She told Umar and Abu Bakr, and that's where that was what stirred the pot. That was an
okay. And what we've just seen is exactly the kind of thing that we wanted to do, and that is the interesting discussion about the different directions that you can go when it comes to Muhammad. So, James, brilliant stuff, because it shows that there are things which you can take to indicate there actually was this Muhammad. And this is exactly what we're trying to find out now in the next 5 weeks, what it is that we can trust, what it is that we can go and verify from Hamza Redbeard's claims. Brilliant stuff. And Rob has just pointed out exactly the fallacy or the problem with this, that if you go and you take this as something, it could be that this is wrong because it's a double think and trying to make it look as though it is real when in reality it is not. So it becomes quite intricate and complicated, and this is what we're trying to unravel.
Either
Sorry.
way, just one more quick thing, because I heard him say it on the video that James sent me, right? He throws in this thing called Sherlock Holmes, right? Hey, if you eliminate all possible, what's the term? Let me just make sure I've got it here. If all the alternate explanations are impossible, and you only have one left, then it must be the truth. And this is quite rightly pointed out. It's called the Holmesian fallacy, and it's a logical fallacy that occurs when some explanation is believed to be true on the basis that alternative explanations are impossible, yet not all alternative explanations have been ruled out. And so if it were the case, because Hamza does this, as James and I in Stops know, right? He'll throw up, as we've done in the show here, hey, he must be a liar, deceived, delusional, or mad, or whatever it was, I think the other one. And he says, pick another one. And you could have a myriad of different things. I could just bring up straight off the top of my head that aliens have changed his mind, and in fact changed the mind of a few other humans around him, so that they all became gullible and hypnotized. Is that impossible? Well, I mean, you're claiming a God, so surely you're not going to say it's impossible. So I can provide other ones. I mean, it is shifting the burden. So there's that part of it. But I think we could easily, quickly think up all kinds of other possible solutions. So the idea that, I mean, if he's just saying it's these 4 ideas as opposed to that, well, again, I suppose we can think about it. And I always think that the easiest one that he kind of skirts around, I don't know if it was James or it was you or somebody else did it, and that is simply Muhammad is mistaken. That's the only one that we need. And that's the hardest one for him to disprove. But he never allows that one. He couches it in, hey, he's delusional or he's crazy or whatever the case. We don't need to go there. He's just mistaken. He honestly thought, all we have to grant is that he honestly thought what he was having in his head and so forth was the truth, but he was just mistaken. How do you demonstrate that's not the case?
Yeah, on that point, actually, there's actually a different point that relates with Moses so the University of Tel Aviv actually did a research thing, and when they said, the burning bush thing that was on fire, they actually thought it was some kind of psychedelic plant that was burning, and when Moses smelt that while he was trying to grab some stuff, he got high and saw a vision. And then most probably, I'm thinking the same thing happened when he went to the cave of Hira and saw Jibril. I think he had the same kind of vision when there's some kind of leaf or plant that he must have ate or smelt or something, and probably saw some sort of vision similar to what Moses saw, if what the study that the University of Tel Aviv did was true, and came out, and him being a con man or whatever you want to call him at that time, probably used that vision to start some sort of a religion, like most hippies try to do nowadays. Just that his turned out to be a success.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's just get some cornerstones fixed here, because remember, we only have a single source. We don't have anything outside of the Sunnah. We only have a Quran which which does not say anything about the life of Muhammad. It barely mentions Muhammad as such. There are, some letters which make the word up, which could be the name, or it could be just a praiseworthy or the praise or something. So the Quran doesn't say anything about Muhammad's life. What we have is we have the Sunnah, we have the Hadiths, we have the Sirah, the biography. Now, between those, we only find out some rudimentary things, that he's born around 570, 571, 572. We don't really know exactly when. So he starts off, and there's a lot of parallels here to Moses and to Jesus. So there's a lot of activity in the beginning where you have the lights of Syria light up, and the water in the well comes and I don't know, bends towards Amina, Muhammad's mother, when she is pregnant with him, and things like that. So he is treated like royalty, the same way as Jesus was, with the star shining and all that stuff, and Moses with a river down the river Nile being picked up by the Pharaoh's daughter and things like that. Then he apparently he becomes a shepherd, so he's just a camel herder. And then there is quiet, there's nothing else. Then he becomes a merchant at the age of 25, marries an older widow, and then he is declared a prophet, and this only happens at the age of 40. So there's a lot of quiet in between, where he goes first to his grandfather, because his father dies during the pregnancy of his wife. The mother then dies. Then he goes to his grandfather, who dies. Then he goes to his uncle, who then teaches him to be a merchant and a caravan manager, if you want to call it that. So he apparently travels to different cities, and then in 610, 611, roundabout there, he has this episode with Gabriel, where he's sitting in the cave looking for solitude, and has this appearance where he is being told to read something, and he doesn't know how to, and things like that. The funny thing is, if I look at only this is nothing new. This is not something that is unique even. This is something that we see in different places. Let me just quickly share this so that you can see that I'm not making this up. Here we go. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So this is what somebody did. And what we're looking at is Ibn Hisham, or Ibn Ishaq's narrative. If you put these two side by side, I don't know if you can read it, it's a little bit fuzzy for me even. So there are different things here. On the left-hand side, it's what we know. He came to me while I was asleep with a sheet of silk brocade and said, "Read, Ikra." I cannot read, but he pressed against me and I thought I would die. Then he released me and said, "Read, what shall I read? I only said this to be delivered, lest," and so on. And eventually he read something and then added to it as he went along over the next 23 years. Now, the funny thing is, we have a very similar story, because it's the story of Kadmon. He's in due time stretched himself out, went to sleep, whereupon he dreamt that somebody stood by him, called him, and said, "Sing to me something." And Kadmon answered, "I cannot sing." Once again, the speaker, "Nevertheless, you must sing to me." "What must I sing?" "Sing," he said, "the beginning of creation." At which answer he began to sing the praise of God, the Creator, verses he had not heard before. And when he awoke, he remembered all that he had sung while asleep, and soon added more verses in the same manner, praising God in fitting style. Now, these are very similar things, very similar stories. Both of them being visited by some celestial whatever creature, telling them to do something that they can't do in praising their Lord and Creator. So what we see is that the entire story of Muhammad is not something unique, it's not something new or something. So when he gets this thing in 611 or 610 or whatever, and he is then elevated to prophet from caravan and camel herder, then this is a story like many others. Now there are other, and I'm very happy that James pointed out that there are different possibilities how you can see this. Anyway, he then receives the first, for the first 10 years, he receives some revelation, sentences from the Quran. So the way that it goes, the original tablets are in golden form, of course, in golden tablets in heaven somewhere, where nobody really knows. If you ask a Muslim, are the tablets containing the Quran created or uncreated? If you have 4 Muslims in the room, you get 5 opinions, because there is no consensus on whether the Quran was created or uncreated. The next thing is, this God reads a sentence to an angel. The angel then zooms down to earth, finds this guy Muhammad in a cave, and says to him, "Okay, today's sentence is all non-believers must die." Okay, so Muhammad, off he goes to his people and says, "Okay, sentence of today is all non-believers must die." Okay, they go, and some are able to read and write. Not Muhammad, by the way. He's said to be unlettered. In other words, he can't read or write, but some of his people are. So they keep track, and there are even stories of Abu Bakr or somebody keeping track of what Muhammad said and bringing conflicting versions. And this is exactly this thing of embarrassment that James has pointed out early. And we see this again and again. And then he receives more and more sentences, but he's going on the tits of the people in Mecca because he's telling them, no, you can't have your gods, and there's only one, and blah, blah, blah. Following Jesus, he eventually destroys all these idols, just as Jesus went to the temple and destroyed all the money changers' tables there. Anyway, so Muhammad goes on the nerves of the people, so eventually they try and get rid of him by killing him. So somebody squeals, and, just in the nick of time, pardon the pun, he runs away to Medina and some of the people with him. And there he sets up shop and carries on with his preaching. And apparently there he's welcome and blah, blah, blah. And he does all these wonderful things, and he submits to his God. And by doing that, goes and destroys all the Jews around him. And then he's killed. So this is roughly the story. And this is something that we need to keep in mind, that number one, he is said to have lived in Mecca, and we get details of Mecca. We get told that it's in a valley, it has a parallel valley, it has a stream, all of which does not match with the geological structures that we see in Mecca. So the whole story of Mecca is wrong. So it must have been somewhere else. And now we have people like Dan Gibson, we have people like Tom Holland, we have people who noticed this and said, well, there's something wrong here. So it can't have been Mecca. So where was this? And we don't know. So there's a problem here right from the beginning that if Muhammad existed, it was definitely not in Mecca. So now we have to go and say, okay, if he went to Medina, there it's possible that you have, because it's a oasis, that you do have agriculture, which is impossible in Mecca because there's no water in Mecca. So you can't have all the produce that is being mentioned in the Quran. You can't have that in Mecca. So and there's another indication that it can't possibly be Mecca. So these are the facts that we have, and now we need to go and look at the story, and now we have to test the claims. If Muhammad comes up with all these stories and he's saying, well, we have, for example, olives in Mecca on the market, which is on the trade route. Can we verify this? Yes, we can. So this is something that we can actually verify, and we know that either he's mistaken, or he's lying, or he's delusional, or he's crazy, or, well, he can't have been deceived, but it's definitely not the truth, because the truth is something that you can compare with reality. And that definitely does not happen. So if you start testing the claims like this, you will see one by one, you need to now run them through this filter and see what happens. So this is my contribution to the whole topic. Can anybody else now elaborate or go further with this?
Yes, I think you did mention about the locations as well. There's another theory, I think Jay Smith and Mel also did something about the location of Al-Hira as well. And I feel like Al-Hira is what modern day Kufa and Najaf are. And Kufa is where Ali is buried as well. And the Kufa, there's some mosques that face the Grand Mosque of Kufa, and the Grand Mosque of Kufa faces Jerusalem, according to Dan Gibson's database. So Kufa does sound what Mecca is described. Kufa could fit that description as well. Kufa is in the Al-Hira region of Iraq, practically. So yeah, that could also be a decent candidate as well. And yes, someone was saying something. I apologize.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, based on what Stops has said, is like, so if the first part of Muhammad's life already, like kind of the basics of where he grew up and stuff, if that already doesn't match reality based on the sort of Muslim sources, then already we have some reason to kind of doubt like the rest of it as being reliable. Like if most of what we know about Muhammad's life comes from this biography by Ibn Hisham, then already kind of like this isn't the most reliable document in the world. And the problem for the Muslim apologist who will try and run an argument, who will try and like sort of present an argument saying kind of, well, Muhammad's made a claim to be a messenger of God, and so either he's lying or he's deluded or he's telling the truth. Kind of or either he's lying or he's mistaken or he's telling the truth rather. Kind of the problem for a Muslim trying to sort of present this argument is that the way in which he wants to discount the other options apart from him telling the truth is he wants to try and appeal to primarily sort of pieces of evidence from this biography, okay? And and Muslims generally have a very high burden of proof here, because kind of you'll see it when they kind of present this kind of argument at Dawa stalls. They'll kind of, when they have someone who's on the fence, they'll say something along the lines of, well, you know, we've presented this argument, you know, clearly he wasn't lying and clearly he wasn't mistaken, and so he must have been telling the truth. And then at that point, they'll say kind of now, they'll say something along the lines of like, well, you know, don't wait too long before conversing, because, you know, now that we've presented this argument to you, they basically start using emotional blackmail and sort of saying, well, you never know what's going to happen. Like, you could die tomorrow and then you'll have to answer to God for why you didn't convert and why you died as a disbeliever. They'll basically kind of threaten them in this kind of way when they're sort of on this kind of on the fence about it. And so like what they're basically saying when they're doing that is that they're kind of saying that their argument to show that Muhammad, that this particular argument to show that Muhammad is a prophet of God, they must be claiming that this argument is so kind of comprehensive and reliable that no reasonable person could doubt it, and such that if you do kind of, you know, after hearing the arguments, don't accept it, then you're basically kind of like, you're not a reasonable person at that point. You deserve to be punished for not accepting this blatantly true argument. But in order for that to be the case, then all of the kind of evidences within the arguments need to be very strong and not sort of unreliable. And yes, already kind of just from what we've heard so far, kind of we can see why the sort of biography of Muhammad kind of already it's on sort of somewhat shaky grounds. Like if even the basics of Muhammad's childhood kind of we don't have any good reason to believe in them, because it just doesn't match the sort of geographical reality of what is Mecca today and what it would have been like 500 years ago. Like there are no mountains, there are no no olive groves. It wasn't on any of the historical trade routes. Then already, like, kind of a Muslim can't say that, oh, this argument is so cut and dry and reliable that you deserve to go to hell and burn in hell if you don't accept this argument. You know, I just think it's kind of important to remind the kind of Muslims or the kind of hesitant people who think that this is kind of a strong argument for Islam, that kind of they're saying that you kind of basically deserve to burn in hell if you don't believe the argument. And for that to be even remotely justified, kind of the argument needs to be pretty much watertight, basically. Like if a reasonable person could doubt like the piece of evidence being brought, then obviously it doesn't kind of reach that justification. And so threatening to kind of burn people in hell for not believing a sort of shaky argument is patently unjust. Anyway, I just thought that's kind of an interesting sort of a consequence of this type of arguments they're providing.
Yeah, and you mentioned Ibn Hisham and Ibn Ishaq as well. Keep in mind, like these authors were not writing this story during the Umayyad period or the Rashidun period. They wrote it in the Abbasid period, and the Abbasid Caliphate started around the 760s, 770s, and it's famous that Mansur himself had definitely an influence in Ibn Ishaq's narrative as well, political influence, Mansur the Caliph, because he needed to justify his rule, and he also linked himself to Ibn Abbas. That's why they call themselves the Abbasid dynasty. So, and Dan Gibson also brings up this good point that what if what we're seeing or what we're hearing is Abbasid propaganda?
Yeah. There's a lot of that. And this is exactly why we're trying to go and bring some light, shine some light on this to see what is, and this is, I think, is what James was essentially saying. What is reliable and what is not? What is being fabricated and what are we expected to believe and what actually is there? And this is the point that I'm also looking at. What is there that I can take as a fact? What can I take as, does it make sense? So if Muhammad is the go-between, I mean, the whole logical sequence of having a God using language, number one, to convey a message is silly. Using a book is even more silly, and using as go-between somebody who is incapable of reading and writing, incapable of taking notes, that is plain ludicrous. But it serves as a brilliant excuse for later generations to say, well, maybe he was mistaken, maybe he forgot things, which is exactly what we see in the Hadith. So we have all these things where we say, well, Muhammad forgot this, and somebody said, well, this sounds like this is the best of the creators. Oh, yeah, that sounds good. Put that into the Quran. And this kind of influence that we see, that this tells us that this is totally fabricated. So was he lying? Well, if he existed and he was told something by his God, no, he wasn't lying. Was he crazy? Well, if he heard these things and just reproduced them from his memory, then he wasn't crazy. Was he delusional? Well, absolutely, because he believed all this stuff that is not correct. If you look at the way you have to bow towards or pray towards Mecca, and I made this point, I need to redo this video. If you're sitting in Canada and you are looking at Mecca, are you looking over the North Pole? Are you looking left or looking right? Because all three options, it's the same distance. It's the same. There's no difference between all these three options. So which one do you take? But in actual fact, you're looking up into outer space, not at Mecca, because your view cannot follow the curvature of the earth. So all this only makes sense if you have a flat earth. So was he deceived? Well, if he got something and somebody told him something, he believed it, then yes. Was he telling the truth? Now, truth in my eyes is subjective. Is truth available to somebody who doesn't know better? Well, then, according to him, he was telling the truth. So how can you test the claim?
Well, I mean, even if he thinks that he's telling the truth, he might not actually be telling the truth. Like, I think we need to be like, I didn't agree with this idea that truth is just some subjective thing. Like, if I close my eyes, like kind of the rocks in front of me aren't going to disappear, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's like you say, right? That's the most plausible explanation, and the one that's hardest for them to defend, and it's the one that Hamza leaves out, which is he's mistaken. He really believed all of this stuff. He's simply mistaken.
Yeah,
the question I wanted to ask you guys is it the case that the surah is the only other thing apart from the hadith that is available? Because Hamza and these other guys say these things. I don't know that they've read any of this stuff, but let's assume they might have read something if we're charitable. I'm in a charitable mood. Is this in fact the only thing, or is there something that is extra biblical, or I don't know what the term is, extra Quranic, I guess would be the term, or extra hadithic, if there's such a thing,
I think
that they can appeal to?
I would actually have to add on that. Like, I know for Christianity, one of the arguments against it is that because the Romans write everything, and the fact that they have no writing about the trial of Jesus is kind of, let's say, untruthful to what is said in religion. So is there any writing with what was left of the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire at Constantinople, about these conquests that Muhammad was doing?
The thing is, like, the earliest document, again, non-Muslim document, is the Doctrina Jacobi 634. And it could be anybody, really, because it just says a prophet of the Saracens or the Arabs. And he has the keys of paradise, but the Jews of Jerusalem see him as a fraud. It does somewhat match the Medina story, where the Medinian Jews saw him as a fraud. But then there's the term, the keys of paradise. And it could have been anybody, because keep in mind, there were not just one prophet in that region. There were several leader prophets, Musaylama being one of them as well, and then there's another one. So,
what was his claim?
That he has the keys to paradise.
Who claimed that?
This is the prophet of the Saracens.
No, Musaylima claimed it.
Musaylima claimed it.
Exactly. He is the one who claimed it, not Muhammad. This is the funny story. So you read in the story that he claimed that he had the keys to heaven, but this was never said by Muhammad, but it was always constantly repeated by Musaylima. This is the funny story.
Interesting. And Musallima was one of the. He actually even approached Muhammad in a letter saying that.
Yes, he was one of the four, exactly.
Yeah, so these were the leader prophets that emerged because there was this huge power vacuum. Because.
But this would go. Let's go into this in the fourth segment where we look at Muhammad in history.
Oh yeah, and there's something. Crap, I had something in mind. Oh. Extra biblical. I think in last year when I was Shia Muslim, I think I mentioned to you guys the Sahih Sajadiya, right? The dua book written by Zainul Abidin, the fourth Imam, and that's where I think I gave you like a brief summary of Muhammad's story, but it's very vague. It's said that the authorship is around the 690s to 740s, but it's really uncertain because there's not a lot of study done on it. And, this got more popular in the 16th and 17th centuries as well in Safavid era. So I have been trying to find something, but with Shia sources, it's very difficult to find like what was the original manuscript of this. And also with then there's Tabari's history as well you can look into, and there's another one that I mentioned, Sulaim bin Qais, the Hadith by Sulaim bin Qais. This was also one of the earlier ones. And then there's the Imam Malik. Have you guys heard of Imam Malik as well? Like his Hadith book is written a lot earlier as well, like a century earlier than Bukhari. I've yet to look into it, but apparently he's one of the earlier Hadith writers.
Well, with that, we have an additional problem that you've just put on the table. Because if we look at the claims made in the Sunnah, for example, we have the Miraj, we have the, the heavenly journey,
yes,
where he takes the flying donkey to Jerusalem, ties it up outside the mosque, goes inside, prays, and then flies up to heaven. Now, the problem is that this mosque didn't exist. It was built by bin Malik, and this is almost 100 years after this Muhammad existed. So there are some like really difficult segments here where if you need to ignore them. So if I look at what Hamza is asking, I think he's doing it wrong. I think you first have to establish what actually are the facts that we're looking at. What actually is there before we can go and do anything else. And I think this is what Mustafa was just saying, and this is what James pointed out as well. And Rob was asking the same question. What is it that we can reliably assume about Muhammad before we can even start talking about it? And this is why, let me just share another document with you, which I found, which sort of illustrates this a little bit, because it's, that's the wrong one. If we go and look at this, was Prophet Muhammad a liar? Well, you need to, human beings lie due to their motives. If there is no motive, why should a person lie? He was known as truthful and trustworthy before claiming prophethood. But what we need to understand is there is only one source that gives us this information that he was known as truthful and trustworthy. It's the same source which tells us about Muhammad. So, it's the same thing. This is what Rob was just saying. There's no extra biblical or no extra, scripture that relates to this. People used to keep their bowment with Prophet Muhammad because they knew that this person will never cheat. Well, how do we know this? Well, the Sunnah tells you. When two tribes were in conflict, they used to call the Prophet for making a decision. How do we know this? Well, the Sunnah. What was the emergency to lie after spending 40 years of his life? Let us analyze the possible motives. So now this person says, well, we have money. Well, he was married to the richest women in Mecca and he became the poorest. Is this correct? No. He was the richest person on the Arabian Peninsula. He was getting not only 20% of everything for his God, he was claiming 20% for himself, plus 20% for his family. So everything that was looted, everything that was taken, belonged to Muhammad to a great extent. He had entire orchards of palm trees and things like that. He owned so much. It was amazing. He had between 14 and 23 wives, each with their own house, their own slaves, their own servants, their own everything. And then people are telling me he was the poorest person. This does not make sense. Then the next question is fame. Did he claim fame? Yeah, of course, because he was the most influential person on the Arabian Peninsula at that time. Then the women, Prophet got married at the age of 25 with the widow, who was 15 years older to him. Yeah, but what about all the others? So here we exhaust all the major motives of a prophet being a liar. No, you have not. So this is the kind of thing that we are getting. Was the Prophet Muhammad crazy? Well, no, of course not, because a lot of people believe this. 2 billion people believe this, so he can't be crazy. What was Prophet deceived and misguided by Satan? Well, the only people to make this claim are Christians. No, it's not. So this is quite funny how people looking at this, Muslims are looking at these claims too, but they are cheating themselves. They are deluded and deluding themselves intentionally when looking at Muhammad.
And most of this stuff is already in the standard narrative, their own sources, and which they are sort of like putting it aside, and you've ignored the Aisha, you've ignored Hafsa. Heck, you've even ignored the story of Zainab bin Jahash, who he had some desire and then gets a conveniently timed Quranic verse to get married to his son-in-law's wife. And what's funny is that also another point you mentioned about the night journey, where the Quran in chapter 17, there's only one verse that talks about it. He goes to Masjid al-Aqsa. Masjid al-Aqsa, it also even translates to the farthest mosque itself. So we don't know which farthest mosque is he talking about. Mosque could even mean gathering place. So then 100 years later, 200 years later, we have Ibn Hisham's story, or Ibn Isaq's story, where he's going up to the heavens. And then we have Bukhari's story, which is more detailed. More details seem to be added. So, this could have been just a simple journey, but then, just compounded over the years, over the centuries.
Okay, anybody else with an opinion how we are going to get anywhere closer to answering the questions asked by Hamza Redbeard?
Well, I think we need to, based on everything you said, if it's the case that it's only the hadiths and the biography, or the sunnah rather, then that's what we need. Because if they are going to accept that, all we need to do is have a look in there and see, as I think James has brought that, you may have it and you may not be doing it on this show, but some of the claims that other people didn't agree that he was either a liar or that he was honest or whatever the case is. So I think we've got to hold them to the standard. So if there are, in fact, so my thing is, if I was speaking to somebody now, I'd go, okay, what is your standard? Okay, so because the video that James sent me, which we can possibly review separately, stops. At least Hamza talked about, he goes with the hadiths and stuff, right? He's not clear, but at least he mentioned the hadiths. Well, okay, are there hadiths that mention people who didn't accept Muhammad? And if they are, and they're Sahih, then what's he got to say about that? Or what has any Muslim got to say about that? If there's nothing, if there's no documents that they would accept that cast any bad light on Muhammad, then I think it's a harder claim to do, because they're not going to accept anything else, and we're going to be dubious if all of their documents only praise him in a good light, which is something that James said earlier, right? If there are things that point against him, then that's the things we could bring up if in fact it covers any of these aspects.
Well, we came across one just a couple of weeks ago where we had Aisha, his favorite wife, one of the greatest scholars in Islam, saying, well, Allah hastens to sort of make you happy, to bring whatever you are asking. So here's one who...
I wouldn't trust that much from a 6-year-old or a 9-year-old or however.
Well, she wasn't 6 or 9-year-olds at the time, so this was that hadith of Aisha saying I think your Lord hastens to fulfill your desire. The hadith kind of says that this was revealed, or that Aisha said this after Muhammad brought the quote-unquote revelation, saying that, you kind kind of messenger, "Oh, you, Muhammad, you alone have the privilege that any woman without a guardian, any woman can give herself to you, because normally if you're getting married, kind of you need the guardian's permission. Like every woman would have a guardian, like a sort of a father who basically controlled her." And so, but God Allah felt it necessary to tell Muhammad, "Oh, this is a benefit for you alone, O Muhammad, that you can marry, any woman can give herself to you." And then Aisha kind of pointed out the obvious, which is like, well, this is pretty self-serving and just doesn't do anything to kind of spiritually guide people or like make mankind better or bring mankind to the truth. The only possible purpose is to, help you kind of have more sexual fulfillment. So yeah, and she kind of did it in a, kind of sarcastic way, it seems like.
So, Rob, yes, there are definitely hadith which are critical. There are hadith which actually question the whole veracity of this. Especially if you go to the Sirah, then you do have these instances. So it's not all the way positive, but they will conveniently forget about those.
Yeah. Okay, but I think that's the thing to bring up, right? Is what do they accept? Like if James says, if they only accept the hadith, have we got this? And this one that you just brought up, right? Because I think about it, it's almost like a chess match. What might a Muslim say in response? He can just say, okay, well, maybe she was just emotional. She was, but that doesn't prove that he was a liar, that he was deceived or he's delusional. So what you guys have brought up with that particular hadith is even if I was a quote unquote honest Muslim and I was being critical about it, all you've shown is that she thought that this appeared to be, what's the word? Not circumstantial. When something happens, what's the word I'm looking for? Where something happens at a time just when you need it, that sort of thing. But that hasn't disproven any of the claims, right? So
it's convenient.
That's what a Muslim might say. Convenient. Thank you. That's the word.
Yeah. So one of the first claims that they make when they kind of present this kind of argument is the kind of sort of irrelevant claim that, Muhammad was known as the truthful. And the reason why I said this is kind of an irrelevant claim is because, someone having a reputation of among their fans of being known as the truthful isn't in itself kind of evidence that they couldn't lie or that they've never lied. You could just as easily be a subtle liar or an occasional liar or that sort of thing, or an intelligent liar, and you would still not ever have been caught as a liar. But nevertheless, it's a good example of how kind of Muslims will kind of spin a narrative in a sort of dishonest way where they neglect the evidence from their sources, which totally contradicts what they're saying. And so there is an example. If people go to KoranX.com, KoranX or one word.com, and they go to chapter 3, verse 161, and then click on the tafsirs, and then they'll scroll down and they'll find that the circumstances of revelation, the Asbab al-Nuzul, by a scholar called Al-Wahidi, records an instance, an occasion where basically, what's the word? Where basically the Quran verse itself, chapter 3, verse 161, it says, "It is not for a prophet to embezzle." Okay, and so you kind of think, well, what's going on here is like the likely kind of context is that it seems as though someone is accusing Muhammad of embezzling. And if you look at like what the circumstances of revelation say about the verse, there is a hadith with the chain of narration saying that this verse was revealed after a battle where like all the war booty from the battle had been gathered, and there was a missing garment that had been gathered but had gone missing. And then Muhammad's own followers said, perhaps the prophet took it. Okay. And then Muhammad said kind of, oh, well, God has just told me that it is not for a prophet to embezzle. Okay. And so this shows that Muhammad's own followers, right, accused him of this dishonest action. They accused him of embezzling. And so kind of like this is counter evidence that kind of contradicts the idea that Muhammad was known as being so truthful that like everyone trusted him just like unconditionally all the time. And this is particularly kind of quite a nice example, because we know that since it's from the aftermath of the battle where they're kind of dividing the war booty, that it's not Muhammad's enemies kind of accusing him of this. It's Muhammad's own followers saying, well, perhaps the Prophet took it. Like, clearly, if he was so universally known as the truthful, honest one, they wouldn't. It's very unlikely that they'd say that. This is counter evidence, and there's more evidence from.
But before you do that, James, maybe just respond to this, because as you're speaking, I'm going like, okay, what might a Muslim say to you? Because obviously you'll have that response, but some people who are listening, and perhaps ourselves and so forth, and the other guys might also have a response to it. So there were two things that I picked up. One was that you said that it was only his people that thought this. And I'm pretty sure I've heard Hamza and others go, no. But even his enemies said he was the truthful one. People who weren't his followers said he was the truthful one. Everyone would leave their stuff with him, no matter who. So maybe just speak on that one first. And then the other one was around this idea that they were challenging him, because the other thing that a Muslim might say is, no, but they were just asking, could the Prophet have taken a ? Not as in an accusatory tone, but just asking, perhaps he may have taken it, we didn't know and we're confused, and whatever the case is, right? So those are the two things that I picked up that somebody might respond with. There might be other things, but those are two of them.
It's always the same source.
And then there's chapter 18 as well, where his enemies are like accusing him of being a fraud, and then they go to Jewish rabbis, and then they give him 3 questions. He takes 2 weeks, and then he says it was because he didn't say inshallah, and that the revelation came after 2 weeks, even though he promised them the answers tomorrow, and that he gives the answers in the vaguest way possible. Do you recall that story, chapter 18?
Maybe get that up, because I just want James to deal with these two, Mustafa. If you can bring that up for us, we can have a look at that. But I just want James or any of the guys to respond, because that might be a Muslim response that I've offered there. They might not think of it, or they might have some other response, but that's certainly two of them.
Yeah, but Rob, there's too many. There's too many to bring them up. I mean, we all know about the story that they ask him, well, if you are really a prophet, then you should be able to answer these questions. What happens there and there and then? And then he says, well, nobody can know what's in the womb. Nobody knows what happens tomorrow. Nobody knows how much we'll earn tomorrow. All these stupid answers, which are totally, totally false. So this is trying to get out of a jam, and he just fabricates stuff which is totally false. It's completely wrong. The other thing we all know the story of the scribe that chucks it in when he realizes that he is influencing the contents of the Quran. So he goes to Muhammad and says, I quit, because you are a fraud, because I am the one who's writing the Quran. My words are found in the Quran. And he chucks it in and leaves.
I think we need the references for this, because we don't all know that. And certainly, I think people who are watching might want the references. I know we're getting to the end of the show now, but I think we should carry on with this, because I think there's a discussion. Maybe we leave out the Quran and some of the other stuff stops, because there's this discussion to be had. And I can pose devil's advocate if you like. I might not be the best, but I'll be listening to what's being said and go, okay, what do you say to this? Because those two things I do, if we can, before the show finishes, maybe just for James to respond to that. Because if any of us bring this up, then we need to have some good response, because I'm thinking this is a chess game and we need to think 13 moves ahead. So what might they say in response to these things?
So so one of the points you said a little bit earlier, Rob, was well, the Muslims say that not even Muhammad's enemies called him a liar, and there's counter examples of that within the Quran itself. Like, for instance, let me get the references, but like the Quran itself kind of sort of makes claim that people are basically saying that Muhammad is only repeating ancient stories that were taught to him, and so this is kind of clearly kind of saying that that the people around him were calling him a fraud. And so just a second. And so one of these is kind of chapter 8 verse 31, which goes, and when our verses are recited to them, they say, we have heard, and if we willed, we could say something like this. This is not but legends of former people. And also in chapter 25 verses 4 to 5, it says, and those who disbelieve say, this is not except a falsehood he invented, and another people assisted him in it. But they have committed an injustice and a lie, and they say legends of the former peoples which were written down and dictated to him morning and afternoon. So clearly, kind of, these people are accusing him of lying, and so the idea that kind of Muhammad, kind of not even Muhammad's enemies accuse him of lying, kind of that isn't really true. What was one of the other points that you mentioned?
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that again. That's great. The other one was with regards to them questioning Muhammad about, the velvet cloak going missing.
Oh, yes.
Could it be, because they might just say, well, hey, it wasn't they were accusing him. They were just questioning, could Muhammad have taken this, quote unquote, with the inference that maybe he took it by mistake, or he took it and there's a reason that they don't know, whatever the case is. It's not accusatory. That's what they might say.
Yeah. Well, I think kind of if we look at if you go to sort of QuranX.com, go to chapter 3, verse 161, and then click on the tafsir button and sort of scroll down, kind of the sort of hadith basically says, some red velvet acquired as booty from the idolaters at the Battle of Badr was unaccounted for, and some people said, perhaps it is the Prophet, Allah bless him and give him peace, who took it. And so Allah, exalted is he, revealed, it is not for any prophet to embezzle. And so clearly, kind of Muhammad himself or Allah thought that an accusation was being made because Allah uses the word embezzle. So if it was just a benign kind of comment and he wasn't being accused of anything, then clearly kind of, the Quran wouldn't need to go out of the way to say, oh, but Muhammad, the prophet wouldn't embezzle. So the fact that it's kind of going out of the way to say it's not, no prophet would embezzle, shows that the accusation of him embezzling was kind of being interpreted and understood that way. And
that's a good response, right? That's the sort of thing that we're looking for. And I think stops this sort of thing. I don't know about you guys. This is kind of really good because I'll try to do my best. I'm not the best by any means, and you guys probably know even more of the Muslim responses. But I think what would be great is to have us go devil's advocate and then respond back again with this response, just like James gives there, because I think that's a really good response to this. Why would Allah possibly say that it was embezzled and this thing come down if it was simply a question mark? It seems much more likely that they were somewhat accusatory of him, and therefore this came down to put this matter at rest. What other response could there be as to why this verse was revealed? I think that's the sort of good response, right? To me, that's the kind of nuance of these sort of things. Otherwise, we gloss over it. But if we were to speak to Muslims, then I think it's useful to know what their responses are and how we could respond to it. And that will take us the entire month. Well, however often you guys are all on here, because I'm okay at playing devil's advocate. I could probably miss stuff, but then we can have the responses to it as James has done here, which I think is really valuable.
Yeah, as for like Abdullah ibn Abi Sar, that's the name of Muhammad's scribe who mentioned. So yeah, if people sort of go on Google and search Abdullah ibn, like IBN, Abi, ABI, Sar, SARH, that will bring up a lot of sort of the pages about his story, about how basically he was the scribe for the Quran, and I think it was when he was writing out chapter 23, verse 14.
Exactly.
Yeah, Muhammad kind of was talking about basically embryo development and saying, oh, it starts out as like a little clot of blood, and then it becomes a kind of a sort of a leech, and then it becomes a hanging thing, all that kind of like vague kind of sort of stuff, Galen ripoff stuff, and then he finishes the verse. Then Abdullah ibn Abi Sar says, wow, blessed be Allah, the best of creators. And he's saying this kind of in amazement, like, oh wow, like, is this really what Allah does? Blessed is he's the best of creators. And then Muhammad says, oh yes, that's good, God revealed it to me that way, add that in. So just after like Abdullah ibn Abi Sar kind of just said something of his own kind of amazement, kind of like Muhammad immediately said, kind of like basically kind of took responsibility from it and saying, oh no, that's actually kind of what God wanted me to say, now add it in. But then why didn't he just add it in a moment ago? Like so at this point, kind of Abdullah ibn Abi Sar realized, well, hold on, God didn't tell me to say those words. This is just what I'm saying. And now Muhammad's copying it and claiming that this is what God's revealed to him. And so he apostatized and went back to Mecca, went back to the went back and started telling this to the Meccans, saying kind of Abdullah ibn that God just does what I say. And then as a result of that, Muhammad was so angry when he conquered Mecca, he kind of gave amnesty to the rest of the Meccans, except 6 people. He said, find them and kill them, even if they're hanging to the covers of the Kaaba. One of them is Abdullah ibn Abi Sar, whose milk brother was Uthman, who was one of Muhammad's loyal followers. And so because of this, kind of Abdullah ibn Abi Sar managed to avoid being executed, even though the order was given, it kind of wasn't carried out. And so and he decides, he knows what's best for him, so he better kind of join the victorious Muslims again. But that's another example of him being accused of being a fraud and a liar by people during his lifetime.
Excellent.
I'll post sources for that as well in the live chat.
I think let's keep that, because I think I'd want to redo that where we're showing it on screen, because then there's a record of it. Otherwise, we're kind of talking about it quite quickly at the end of the show, and most people would miss that. So I think that's been really valuable. Yeah, brilliant. Stops. All yours, sir.
Yeah, the thing is, I didn't know in advance that this kind of thing was going to come up. Otherwise, I would have prepared it. This was now from the top of my head, and there are hundreds of others. You just need to think about it, and you will come across them. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, have we in any way managed to come closer to showing what Hamza was saying or claiming? And there we have to say, well, we're going to find out for the rest of the month. Okay, we're going to settle down with the hadith of the week, and then we're going to continue next week with this. When a thing disturbs the peace of your heart, give it up. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. When a thing disturbs the peace of your heart, give it up. It's that easy. It's that easy indeed, and therefore this is what you need to do.
Oh,
it's good advice.
I did say before I forget, I'll tell you this quick story. If that's okay. And I did it again with the, let's make sure I've got the right screen up here. I did it again with the inheritance error, right? And I had this on Discord. So here's Surah 411. And I sort of went through it with this particular, I was out walking actually, so I wasn't prepared where I could stick this all down. And we went through this whole thing. And at first, the Muslim, the one Muslim I was speaking to, he was of the view that, no, hang on a moment, what you can do is you take this 2/3 of the daughter, and then whatever's left, you kind of divide up, and then there's no problem. And then, of course,
the reduction argument, yeah.
Yeah, but this isn't but it's actually not it's a reduction of the total. So if you had, let's say, 1,000 coins, you give the
there's
daughter
2 approaches, Rob. There's 2 approaches. One is the proportion, one is the reduction. This is the reduction one.
Yeah. And so this is what he started with. Then I showed him, Ibn al-Khattab, who basically read the verse the way we did, where there was I think it was the husband and the 2 sisters, if I remember. I can't remember the exact thing. I've got this in my notes here somewhere. And so they went with Awal, right? And he was the closest to Muhammad, and I think that's where Awal turns out to be the way to do it. And that's one of the ways I'm going to do this in the future. But then what this guy did, he changed his mind. And this is what I mean by Muslims looking at a text and using it in their own way, which was self-defeating. He looked at this verse and he said, hang on a moment, but this verse does not explicitly say that this is the way you are supposed to do it under every circumstance. And I responded and I said, okay, what is it that you would need to see? And he pointed to, I think it was 484, and said, hang on a moment, but hey, it tells you to go to people of the book, people of knowledge, etc., etc. And I said, okay, well, that's one thing. But what would you need to see in this verse? Would you need to see something that says, and this applies under every circumstance? And he went, yeah, I want to see that would help. And I said, but hang on a moment. Are you going to be consistent? And then at that moment, one of the other guys came in who kind of also heard about this, and he brought up kind of a similar one to me. And he said, "But hang on to the Muslim. If you go that route and you say, hey, but the thing that's missing from this entire verse is that it isn't explicit. It doesn't explicitly say for all circumstances. Then what about when you are told to? What about when you're told to eat? Where you can't eat pork or you can't eat certain meats, right? Swine." Because there, if it doesn't say explicitly under all circumstances, that this guy said, no, I thought it was beautiful. He said, well, then if it's a Sunday and I'm feeling really hungry and the sun is shining down, but that's a circumstance that hasn't been disqualified by the Quran, by your own standard, because it doesn't say in that verse under all circumstances. And at this point, this particular guy kind of realized that he was trying to do a special plead on this thing and then just kept repeating it over and over that, hey, it doesn't say in here that this is for all circumstances, and therefore the awal cases for those or for other circumstances that aren't covered by the Quran. And I said to him, look, it would have been very easy, right? Because the Quran, all it had to say is that this is for all circumstances. Or indeed, it could have said, hey, and there's certain circumstances which it will overprescribe, and here's the method to deal with it, or speak to Muhammad. And then none of us would have ever brought this up. But I wanted to say the story at the end again, just to listen to this, right? And we went over this time and again. We explained why this wouldn't work, why, he was contradicting Umar. Umar didn't believe that. Umar believed what we did, which is this is exactly the way to do it, precisely because he said, hey, and he discussed it with his companion and said, hey, we've got to use this method. And one of the other guys, I don't remember his name now, challenged him on this, and he said, and they had a discussion, and this other guy was overruled. And so they went with Umar's version, who is the closest to Muhammad, because this didn't happen in his lifetime. And so this is the method that you ought to take as a Muslim if you accept Sunni hadiths, etc. But this guy just couldn't get this right. So that's why I went with this whole thinking thing of how they try to read something and when it suits them. In any other circumstance, when a verse is like this, that includes all circumstances unless it says not in this circumstance. But suddenly, because he was against the wall here, he wanted it must say under all circumstances. So I thought I'd leave you with that, just as because I speak to these guys, and I don't do it all the time, but because I'm kind of known for doing it, and a few of the other guys are now, they come and say, hey, I've worked this out. And the other beautiful thing is what I've now noticed, and I think James was there and we talked about it, get them to write the numbers down. Once they write the numbers down,
exactly,
then they're dead in the water. Because now all we do is we take the Quran and we use these fractions, whatever number we're going to take, we use their fractions, and we see the numbers don't match. Every time the killer question I ask is, which number should I take? What the scholars say or what the Quran says? I've only ever once had one guy say what the Quran says, but what in his mind he meant was, and I said, well, in that case, it doesn't work. No, he goes, but what the Quran is saying is this, and he points to the scholars. So he was utterly confused, but all the rest of them won't answer that question. And so I thought I'd leave with a story of how they think and how they start to interpret and put things onto verses like this, where everybody, including Umar himself and the rest of us, all see that this incorporates every scenario, unless it were to say it doesn't. Otherwise, you would have to have that as a qualifier for every other verse in the Quran, in which case everything else, as long as you can pick out a scenario that hasn't been disqualified, you could say, well, I'm going to eat pork on a Sunday when it's really hot and I'm really hungry, because it hasn't disqualified. It just says you shouldn't eat pork. But that doesn't say under all circumstances. So we leave you with that. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for that story. All right, guys. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you next Friday. Rob, I'm with you and hope I'm thinking of you tomorrow in this difficult time. And I hope that next week you're going to be okay. We will definitely see you on Friday again for the next installation where we are going to be looking at Muhammad on the Gin and Tonic Show. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much for the people listening and watching and talking and chatting and typing in the chat. Thank you very much for the panelists. Thank you for everybody here giving your opinion and giving your valuable input and all your knowledge. It's really appreciated and super that it's not just one or two, but it's so many people. It's a pity we didn't have Smartcat here as a Muslim to give us his
we could go on until
perspective.
Midnight.
Yeah, it's also true. But it's good to be able to sort this out once and for all, and
Yeah.
it's nice to have different perspectives. It would be nice to have a Muslim who could say, well, hang on, but this is, I mean, you're doing a very good semi-Muslim job, Rob, but it's not this.
Yeah, but I'm going to be intellectually honest. I think that's the biggest
That's the problem.
If we had Redby and Hamza on here, and I don't have
shit.
to say a word, just you and James, for example, or just the four of you, I just sit and watch as a spectator, it wouldn't go well, right? Because all of those claims that he and others make very strongly, when we start to go look at them, when we take the time, when we read these, as James has done and you've done and the other guys, then, of course, we can now appeal to this. And the claim that he makes, which he's never challenged on or asked to give the evidence for or allowed for counter evidence to be produced, which James did try, but they overtalk him, then it wouldn't work so well. But when you're in your echo chamber and you can just say it without having to show it, well, then you sound really amazing until you put under the pressure. Which but then again, if you want to avoid all of that, then you just don't come onto a show like this or anywhere where it's neutral ground where that pressure can be applied.
And if there's a Muslim still listening, what you need to learn and what you maybe need to tell the others, if we are offering to come and help you out, why don't you take it up? Because if you don't, if you apply censorship, we're going to do it anyway, but then we're going to do it our way. And then it's even more painful. And this is what I said to Hamza as well. He came up with the 7 ways of worshipping. If you would have taken me on right there and then, I would have shredded it, sure, but not as thoroughly as I am doing it now, because I'm now writing a piece on this where I'm taking apart every single sentence. So you would have come off much better, much lighter, if you would have done it online at the time and not given me the time to do it on my own way, in my own platform. So maybe this is a lesson that you can learn. Good night, everybody. See you next week on Friday. And if you feel like it, come to Discord and chat if you have a specific issue, and we can discuss it there. Thank you very much, guys. See you next week.
Good night.
Good night, guys. See you in Discord.